Hey all, Game Methuselah. Excuse the glasses, I'm painting. I just thought while I was doing this, I would put out a little quick video here for you and just go over a couple quick things. One, I'm going to be in LAX at OrcCon this weekend to play at the LA Hilton Hotel. And I'm going to be there running games, I'm going to be playing games, and if you guys are around, come by and stop and say hi. Also, for those of you who don't know, at the end of the month, I'm going to be in Pennsylvania for Winter Wars. So if you're going to be around in that area or going to Winter Wars, look me up there or send me a message, and maybe we can meet up for a cup of coffee or shoot the shit about gaming. Did I say that out loud? Anyway, I just wanted to let you know. But what I wanted to talk to you about is I was thinking about the various things I've talked about and how you run games and how you role play. And by the way, I do appreciate all of you who've gone on to the D9 Games dash Twilight of Fae online and watching my partner Steve running videos on how to run the game and how to play the game and the other things he's talking about as well. So it's fun to hear more stuff going on. I'm not on that channel as much, but I'm following a lot of it and I'm appreciating it there. So I'll likely be on it more because we want to start doing some more videos on that as well. But I thought the thing to go over with you that might help. I keep saying that you should be running your own content. I know I sound like a broken record, but even if you're running modules and stuff, I think that the thing that I wanted to get across was how I run games and how I think it might help you to kind of think about this. Whenever you run your first game, and that's why I was discussing this, because I'm going to be obviously running games with people who've literally not played my game before, not played in my system before, and in some cases not even played before. We're getting new players who are coming in, who are being referred over by people who know them and say, hey, you may really like coming to play RPG, kind of how D&D was back in the 70s. And I like that. I like new players. But when you're running the game for the first time, you want to make the game basically as simple as you possibly can, but make it feel challenging, but not necessarily be challenging. That's something that 4th edition helped a lot with, where they came out with minions. And we have that with obviously our low-level characters being very similar in that type, that they're not really that threatening. They do a little bit of damage. They really don't take any hits. So if you beat on them, they die. And it allows you to run a large quantity of creatures to basically get people sort of into the game and understanding how the rules mechanics work, because they're going to be rolling dice a lot. In our case, giving them opportunities to get roll an enlightenment, which is really exciting for people, because when you roll the double nines, you get the crit, and then you get to make up your own special new skill for your character based upon what you did in your roll for that enlightenment. And that seems to get people really enthralled and into the game. We've had a ton of enlightenments with new players because we restarted it up, looking at it from the Fomorian side, where instead of the players being in the south, they're up in the north, in the Scotland areas, and they're essentially working for the Fomorian trolls and trying to help them. Now, they don't know what's in the south necessarily, and they don't know what the elves are and how they're going to interact. So they're learning, but in all the initial encounters, it's real simple. The second thing, and maybe the most important thing I wanted to bring across, was how I run games and how I think you should sort of think about it. Even if you're running modules. Modules are usually good about giving you some sort of introduction to whatever adventure you're running. Maybe a backstory or something. If they don't, then whatever game world you're running normally has a gazetteer type thing where you can buy a book that tells you all about the world and what's going on. Now, I don't necessarily like programmed adventures, but I do love getting these world books. People have written up everything about the world, and it's there. Because from that, you can literally look into any area you're running, find all kinds of what's going on, and put that into your very own game. Even if you're running modules there, even if you're just using pre-published things, even if you're doing your own, it doesn't make any difference, but you have some idea of what's supposed to be there. And thusly, you're really spreading the value of the game itself to the players. And they can work off of that. The other thing is, I like the idea when you are going on an adventure, you start it usually from maybe a city or something where you're going from, even if it's your home base, and there's some backstory. You come up with an idea to give them some idea why you're going there. It's this or it's that, a fallen ruin. We think there might be something interesting here. The lord of the village or the Fomorian king sends you up there because he wants you to find whatever magic you can and bring it back to him. And so he sends you out, however it goes. But the thing is, you're not necessarily going to know. So the way I always run my adventures up is if I have an underground, I populate it with creatures, but I don't necessarily put down that there are 8 creatures in this room because I won't necessarily know whether I'm going to have 4 players or 6 players or 8 players or more. I mean, we have sometimes very large groups of players playing the game. And you're obviously not going to run the encounter for 4 players in a module, or in my case, whatever I've written for 4, against 8. It's going to be a waste of time. At the same time, if you're writing it up for 8, you don't want to throw it against a party of 4, because it's very likely that they're going to end up frustrating or potentially even destroying your game people. And that is what you do. Most people who run modules, and what I always feel about modules, it's like listening and orchestra play the Beethoven's Fifth Symphony or something, where they have all the sheet music in front of them, and they're going to make it exactly the way it's written on the music, and they're going to play it exactly the same every time. And that's what I always feel about modules. There's no spontaneity. There's nothing new and interesting. It's always the same. But really, I think that running RPG campaigns is kind of more like jazz. You've got an idea and you're starting to riff, and maybe there's a song you guys have played, but everybody sort of evolves. And if you've got 4 players, like you have 4 musicians, they're going to play it a certain way. They're going to riff and get together, and they're going to put their own touch onto that piece of music, which is, as I look at it, the way the game is running. And that's what you want. You want people to sort of improvise in your game. You want them to add what they think is going on and add it to your game. And that's a great way to run the game, because often they'll give you ideas that were better than what you thought of. They're going to kind of look at it and say, I'm going to look for this, I'm going to look for that. And you might say, okay, well, sure, there's a 1% chance you're going to find something. And then you go from there and you make the roll. And if you make it, now you have to riff. You have to figure out what could be there. What interesting thing did they find? Maybe they found this magical item or a little hidden door, and the hidden door leads to some new treasure. All these things are important, especially when you're running new players. I always think that when you're running a new game, you always very quickly want to give out some magical items. They don't have to be the greatest magical items in the world, but just that and little interesting things, tidbits, maps, history, and whatnot. And then in your battles, if they're low level and they're new, you want to run them lots of little weak creatures that they can beat up on and still feel like they're in threat, because they are. I mean, rats aren't very tough, but 20 rats could be a real problem. And that is how I always look at the game as we get started with it, is that it all is going to be just exactly like a jazz. You get 7 players, they're going to be adding all kinds of things they're trying to do for their character, types of characters they want to run, all these things. And mostly, like I say, you want to, as a DM, try to find a way to say yes. You want to try to find a way to make the game good for them. Because as I look at the game, and as I mentioned, your job as a DM is not there to just basically read the adventure and parcel it out and, oh, you won or you lost, and here's the magic if you found it. If you didn't find it, you don't get it. It's really a matter of entertaining the players you have and getting them really involved in your campaign or in the future adventures of your item. The more you can do that, the better chance you're going to have to get people really hooked in the game and obviously interested in, if it's your story, and if it's a continuing campaign, to get them for that. And that's how they will fall in love with the game. Now, I paint. I try to get people involved in the painting. That is a lot harder to do, but you get my drift on that. It's all a matter of trying to get him is involved in the game as possible and allowing their characters to do things that are going to make it interesting for the players who are running these characters. It's not hard. And I think a lot of people feel that they don't want to do the jazz. They're worried about the idea that if they're riffing on their own and they're putting their own content out there, or if they're putting their own opinion out there, that somehow people are going to feel like, well, wait, I understood that this, this programmed adventure always goes this way and it's not going this way. And I'm not sure you want that. I think in our case, like I said, since I've been playing for 50 years, it's one of those things that we always have had our own adventures. So what you did in the first adventure carried on into the second adventure, and the third, the fourth, and you built this cohesive party of adventurers that worked together from adventure to adventure to adventure. And it wasn't just whoever shows up, plays in the module, and goes from there. Like often if you've played in the living games, that's what happens. You just show up, whatever 4 people are available for the game, they're in the game, boom, you're out. And it's better than nothing, but it's not a satisfactory and satisfying campaign. And that's all what I always want to see people do. Building something where every time they get together, they're drawing down the story and making the game better for the players, and also finding a new outcome and ending that you might not have ever expected from it when you started running this game. And that's what makes it interesting for the DMs as well. That's why I've been able to DM for years. I'm fascinated what players can come up with. I'm always mystified at their ways of sort of conniving and figuring ways around the evil things I've done to make their lives difficult. Yeah, I'm also interested in learning how they want to modify the rules and modify their characters. And can I do something that's not in the rules? And I think I can. So how do I accommodate that? And these are all things that I think as you do them, you'll be able to become better at them. If nothing else, you'll always look, if you're not the most experienced player, ask the experienced players. If you don't have any, go online. Ask some of the big names. People have learned that way. There are players now who I see every week on their channels telling you awesome pieces of information where, they started like most people did. They didn't know much, or they tried to, and they're just trying to do the best they can. But after a while, they become pretty darn good. And that's what you, I think, should try to aspire to. Remember, when it's all said and done, this is a real high quality entertainment, and you're part of the story. If you're running a module, the other thing I would suggest is don't run the module. Take the module. We're all going to run in the module, and I'm going to generate a character. I will be the one who reads the module. I'll be the one who modifies it and puts the creatures down, and we'll all modify based upon what the module says we can do. But you have a character skin in the game, so to speak, so that you're playing it, and at that point, whoever you trust at the table, you let them run your character, and they run the monsters. But the other thing is you're grooming your group. Let them run the monsters. Oh, okay, there's 35 goblins here and a werewolf. And you put them down on the table and you say, Cindy, would you run this battle? Now, she may not feel confident, but it's like, oh, I'll help and we'll work it out. And other people will help. And everyone sort of works together, not an opposed type of thing. And that sometimes is what I hear when people play. It's like, well, don't help the DM. Well, that's the worst thing you can do. Because if you don't help the DM, your game is going to drag. And the second thing about it is the DM is going to become frustrated. Well, why are you making it difficult on me? I'm trying to provide you with nice entertainment. If you're going to grump and make my evening unpleasant while I'm trying to make your adventure fun, it makes me feel like, why am I doing this? And I think this is going to be a scope. If you ask any DMs, they might tend to agree. You want to make it as fun for the DM as you possibly can, because, everyone at the table wants to have fun, and that includes the guy behind the screen or girl behind the screen. We've had both. I wanted to point this out. Like I said, I'm going to be up running more games. And so this thought is always in my mind. Are they having a good time? If they're not having a good time, why? Is the system wrong? Am I presenting it badly? Am I not giving out enough information? Am I not making it clear? Or am I not making it important enough for them to feel that they're involved in this game? These are all the little things you get. And while running the game, you, again, like a jazz musician, want to be able to change the tempo and the tone and all the rest of it that comes in the game whenever you can, to make sure that people are having a good time. And sometimes you can't have a good time. Once in a while, your character gets killed and things are bad. But Death is even an interesting thing. You can always pull a rabbit out of the hat, and like we have done, I've gone into Hades. Did people bring back people from the abyss and have to sneak by Cerberus to get them out of there so they can come back to the real world and get back into the campaign? You can find all kinds of ways to get around anything in the game as a DM, as long as you're using your mind and being creative. Some players, like me, I like sometimes a character gets killed. That's the way it should have been. This character sucked. He should have died. But sometimes it's like, you've been playing for months and months, and then it's like, oh my gosh, Jim lost his big time wizard. We can't allow that. We have to go find a way to get him resurrected. And that's a whole series of adventures right there. And these are all things you can do while you're building your own campaign. If you're using modules, throw modules in. Then write some content of your own, and then find a non-D&D module if you're playing D&D and throw that in. You can put all these things together, and all of it can blend, because truthfully, the thing is, the game systems are the game systems. You know that I, at D9 Games at Twilight of Fae, we're doing videos on that, and my partner's talking about it all the time. But as I tell you, game systems really aren't relevant. In fact, somebody just gave me the new 5th edition rules, and I didn't care. I wasn't going to buy it. I mean, I figured whatever, I'll hear about whatever changes were there, and it came. And then a lot of people were saying, well, it's really this or it's really that, and it's complaining here and complaining there. But I got the book. Somebody handed it to me. He's like, Merry Christmas. And as I was looking at it and reading through it, I said, well, they cleaned up a lot of things, and they threw a lot of art in there. And I heard things about the art, and I said, I don't have a problem with the art. I looked at it and said, I don't think it's unreasonable to make the art look like often the players who are playing the game, or making them think like, hey, look, this person's like me. I feel like I'm involved, especially for maybe younger players who aren't necessarily as well engaged in saying, I'm going to run a Conan-est, or I'm going to run a Casca character, or I'm going to run something from some other book I've read, or something I want to do that makes me happy with the game. A lot of times you get gamers who just do the min-maxing and stuff, and they're just trying to min-max their characters and stuff, and that's reasonable too. So you should be able to handle all of that and make it interesting. And that's kind of what I try to do all the time. And that's kind of what I try to share with you on the videos, like with the Murphy York traps and things like that people like to talk about. I'm always trying to challenge the players with something interesting and then give it a little twist. And in the game we just had last week, the party bypassed some rats because, they're local. They didn't want to deal with those rats. Well, it had a rat generator. And I kept rolling a D9 worth of rats each turn. If I rolled a 0, then the rat generator burns out and there's no more rats. But I never did. And they went on and they got in a battle with a ghost and some undeads, still trying to find this golem that they had a little heart for. They had to stick it in the heart and get the golem out and bring it back to the king. And well, they found they looked through that. They kind of battled their way through the undeads a little bit, but kind of still looking for the golem. They found it, and a drow who seemed to be somewhat mysterious and kind of keeping an eye on them. So they were a little worried about that. And they got the heart in it, and they're trying to get it open because it's rusted shut and all that. And they finally did. They got it going, and then they give it some really elaborate command, which, of course, it wasn't going to be able to do. Finally, he says, walk forward. And that it can do. And it walked forward, and fortuitously, they were able to kill off the undeads, and the poor ghost tried to infest and take over the golem, which was a mistake. And so now the golem has a ghost inside of it. That'll be some story for a later part of this adventure. But they were able to get out because, frankly, I'm not sure they'd have been able to get through 50-some-odd little rats. Not much, but a lot of them. And one little bite and a little nibble here, eventually even the toughest characters can fall. So I just wanted to get on there and say that, come see me at the con. Come say hi if you're there. If you've never been to a con, you've got to go. These cons are great. I know things cost more now than they used to, but that always is something that I'm aware of because, well, I'm an old curmudgeon. I hate things that have gotten more expensive because I remember the day. You know what? You get a bunch of friends, you rent a room, throw 4 people in there with sleeping bags if you're young, and you can just lay on the floor. That's what we did when we were young. And at least you have a place to shower and brush your teeth and change your clothes and store your stuff, store your miniatures and whatever new treasures you find while you're at the con. Something really fun to do. I'd recommend it wherever you are, go do a con. And if it happens to be a con where I'm at, and I'll try to keep you up to various as we try to do more. Or if you know a really good con, I'd still love to go to Dublin and go do the con there, but have not had the opportunity to make the trip to Ireland since I went for my honeymoon years ago. It's still a great thing to do, especially if you love gaming, because the neat thing about it is two things. You're going to see all kinds of new things. You're going to meet new people. Some of them are going to be really interesting and get you into stuff. And then there's always these little bargains of people who are maybe selling off old figures or selling off old games, and you can pick up something you want to play cheap, especially miniatures. I cannot tell you how many 45, 50-year-old figures I've picked up at cons for nothing. For virtually nothing. At, a swap meet table, this guy's like, yeah, these are I know they're lousy. I'm like, yeah, they're lousy, but they're 50 years old. I want them because they're the originals. And the great thing about originals for someone who likes to collect like me, there's not many of them because things get destroyed, things disappear, and to be very frank, not a lot of them were made back in the day. So I had a little Ral Partha Rogue. Is he here? He's not. I put him away already. But I wanted to show you, I just fixed one up. He's the 6th Rogue I had. But for 30 years, I only had one because they came out, I bought mine, and everyone else bought them, and I never saw them again. And it was the best Rogue on the market at the time. I show it to people now, and they go, yeah, so what? But it's really, really cool to find things that are vintage, especially if they drive back to the memories. And the memories for you, maybe the 90s and the 2000s or whatever. But if you can find old, cool figures, and I do this all the time because I know what they are and I know how old they are, usually always by just looking at them, it's fun for me to collect them. And oh my God, since I discovered Army Painter, which they call the dip, even though I don't dip it, I brush paint everything on, I think I've dipped about 150 figures, old figures that had beat up paint jobs I could just touch up, didn't have to go into the shading, didn't have to do all the work, didn't have to do everything, and just put the Army Painter on, get the Winsor Newton spray flat out. They're beautiful. It's amazing. In fact, if I had had that back in the 70s, it's likely I would have even more miniatures than I do now, which is actually kind of frightening. But anyway, until I have a chance to speak with you again, get out there and enjoy your game. Whatever it is, and play it. And if you like Traveler or Call of Cthulhu, I'd recommend those too. There's a whole lot of things out there. If nothing else, come check out my Starguard. We're going to be playing Starguard back in Pennsylvania for sure. We got a whole boatload of armies here. I'm hoping we can get at least a game or so in LA if some of the guys who are local and have some armies can show up, because I've only got my one army. The rest I've given away to people in the past. And those are all back in Virginia in the collection. So they'll be part of what goes on at Winter War. So if you want to see a 50-year-old miniature space game, it's pretty cool. And John McEwen did a great job of making this game 50 years ago. It still holds up today as a fabulous game. Much better than his 4th editions and others where he tried to get too complicated. That super simplicity of the game and the beauty of the figures and the cool content made that game great. And I love it and still love it 50 years later. So, till I have a chance to speak with you again, fight me devils fight, for I hate peace. Game on. See you at the con.